Now, income distribution, some good news and some bad news. Right? According to the Gini coefficient, nationally, income distribution has worsened by 5%, and I believe that the gentleman from FERCA is here. The last budget measures probably will have made the Gini coefficient go worse, even worse, because of the reduction in taxes at the upper end. Right? But one interesting thing is that it's improved in rural areas. While you might think it's good news, right? Unfortunately, it is not good news either, as we'll see in a moment, right? The table, on these two tables over here, they give you Gini by population or by households. I prefer to use the population Gini because households can have different numbers of people within it, and it's not a very accurate measure. So if I were you, forget about the household Guineas and things, just look at the population Guineas. Essentially, it has gone worse in urban areas, improved in rural areas. But you look at the next table, and what you see is something very, very strange. That first graph over there, black over there represents the urban areas, and you will see that this is the percentage change in income per adult equivalent, right? Black areas are all above the axis. In other words, all urban quintiles, the poor and the rich, became better off between these two HIESs. The green lines represent the rural quintiles. Quintile 1, of course, is the poorest 20%, going to Q5, which is the richest 20%. They all reduced their real income per adult equivalent. Their standard of living went back. But the interesting thing is, the biggest declines were at the top end of rural households. The biggest declines were not at the bottom end. And essentially what that graph seems to suggest is that those people who are earning cash incomes in the rural areas, the sugarcane farmers, the taro farmers, etc., these are the ones in rural areas who happen to be better off. The ones on the left hand, they are the subsistence farmers. They had a decline in income as well, but the decline was not as big as those at the upper end. So the improvement in Gini coefficient in the rural areas, interestingly, is not because the gap between the rich and the poor. Sorry, it is true. The gap between the rich and the poor did close, but it didn't close because the poor were getting more wealthy. It closed because the well-off in the rural areas were becoming poorer. May I explain that again slowly? Yeah? Again slowly. The gap between the rich and the poor did close, but ideal thing would have been if you could have made the poor richer. But what has happened in rural areas between these two household surveys is that the rich in the rural areas have become poorer because of the decline in the cash economy in Fiji. So what appears to be good news, which is the Gini coefficient has improved in rural areas, when you look at it a little bit more sophisticatedly, it's not all that good news. It really means that all those people who are really producing all this cash crops from the market, etc., they have been doing very, very badly in the 5 years. And if you look at the latest Bureau report, which is the key economic statistics, and you look at the production of taro, cassava, yams, and all these kinds of things, despite all the efforts by government, in fact, there has been a total decline in production in nearly all of these agricultural commodities. Now, I just throw this in front of you because we'll talk about this later on, I'm sure, after the presentation by Fazrul from FERCA. That all societies have income distribution policies, and you can do it either through taxation, such as progressive taxes on incomes of companies, or taxes on luxury items. Right? But you can also have taxes which work in the opposite direction, and value-added tax in Fiji, unfortunately, has increased quite dramatically from 12.5% to 15%. It falls on everybody, and what you should understand really is that VAT is a very regressive tax because it hits consumption. And because the poor people pretty well consume all their income, the entire income is therefore taxed by the VAT of 15%. So, while people might say, oh, we've removed taxes from the poor because we've raised the tax threshold, the fact is that the poor still pay 15% tax on every single dollar that they earn. They earn tax, they pay tax of VAT on every single dollar they earn because they spend the entire income. Whereas people at the upper end, they might only spend 20% or 30% of the income, so the VAT only affects that. So VAT is generally considered by economists to be regressive, right? Now, in the last budget, income taxes were reduced from 30% to 20%. Good for people like most of us, corporate taxes have gone down from 28%, to 20%. Good for the corporate people who are usually the well-off. But of course, the VAT is still there, on the things. So, I think it is something to think about, when we're looking at, policies for redistribution and helping the poor. One of the ways is through taxation, and I think that the government needs to think about reversing some of their policies, in taxation at the upper income level and on companies. Because in the end of the day, FERCA has to find the revenue to fund government expenditure, and if they can't find it at the top end, then the only other place where they can hit is at the middle and the bottom end, which is the middle income and the poorest people. So let me, maybe we can just quickly put that through, Tevita, because what I would like to suggest, is that after our policy stakeholders have made their presentation after morning tea, right, they will be coming up with their recommendations and so on. And at the end of every presentation, we've got all of these recommendations, which can be discussed, and if people feel strongly enough about any one of them, they can put their hands up, they can suggest changes, additional ones, or suggest that maybe we should throw them out. So it's entirely up to those people who are attending these workshops, what they do with these policy recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.